I wrote the book for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. The people that consider themselves inventors are really tire kickers. I was doing content marketing in print form back in the 90s. With a couple of years of strategic work, the company could be worth $25 million. That is a high value conversation.
This is the Content Capitalists Podcast. We talk to business owners who've used video to grow their businesses to $1 million a year or more. How they did it, what worked, what didn't. Welcome to the Content Capitalists with your host, Ken Okazaki.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Content Capitalist Podcast, where I have conversations with businesses doing at least 7 figures a year, many times a lot more. Now, I've got someone special with me today, and the reason I say special is because I've had a lot of coaches on this podcast so far. I had a lot of people who are doing digital courses, doing like coaching, training, and things like that, but I haven't had anybody yet who's been an absolute professional and the top of his game in the category of patents. So today I've got with me Rich Goldstein. Rich, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ken.
Rich, I remember the first time we ever hung out together, and that was probably 2017 or 18, somewhere around there. And we were in San Diego because there was a marketing conference in town, and we ended up like sharing the same like Airbnb because somebody was organizing something. And I remember we had a couple conversations, and I thought, this guy is one smart cookie. And I got to get to know him better. That was my first impression of you, by the way.
And then you got to know me better and you realized that was just a facade.
That was until all the tequilas came out.
You said, Rich, how do you put on this image of being so smart? And like, I've just got to get to the bottom of how you portray this brand of yours.
Well, it could have been that, but I think there's actually something actually behind everything. So, Rich, number one, I'm really glad that we ended up staying together and had a few conversations and got to know each other. But number two, I would appreciate if, for my audience, you could give us like the 30,000 foot view. What do you do? Who do you help? And what do you help them accomplish?
Absolutely, Ken. So I work with entrepreneurs to help them to create IP assets, to get patents and trademarks that help them while they're operating their company in the expected way. In other words, prevent others from copying what they're doing, but also really increase the value of the company for exit. So I help them to create those assets that become a multiplier when they're ready to exit their business.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've seen a whole bunch of case studies, but a lot of people, when they think of patents, I think a lot of people are thinking of like physical inventions, but you work with a lot of people who are actually in the information space as well. Does what you do apply for people who are like doing coaches and courses, or maybe like training kind of businesses?
I mean, not as much for patents. So for training type businesses, it's typically trademarks that are at the front line, trademarks that are for the branding, and that branding could be for the name of the program or the name of the, let's say, the methodology, and a lot of times even terms that you use within your framework. Let's say you have a framework that has kind of like 4 buzzwords that are used as part of the distinctions of whatever you're teaching, like that could be trademarked as well. So so the front line often is with trademarks, and then a lot of times people protect content through agreement, through contracts. So like if you have, say, coaches that are using your coaching methodology, you have contracts with them that they are able to use your IP under certain circumstances, and so a lot of that protection ends up being by contract. Patents don't typically apply unless you're creating a platform, like a software platform that is involved in delivering whatever it is that you're delivering in terms of a result.
Got it. Richard, I'd love if we could go back a little bit in time. I know that right now you're a prolific content creator. And the reason I know this is every time I'm researching, and just for the listener's sake, full disclosure, we do have a client, a client attorney, not client attorney. Which is this client attorney?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We have an arrangement. I've hired him to help me with this invention, and he's doing a kick-ass job with patenting my invention called the Go Box Studio, which a lot of my audience will know about. But um,
We have an attorney-client relationship in addition to our friendship.
we do.
In addition to me being the subject matter expert of the moment on this podcast.
Thank you for clarifying the term so well, which is what lawyers are supposed to do, right? There's no room for misinterpretation. Now, every time I Google things about patents and developing technology, very often your YouTube videos will come up and your blog articles come up. And this is not because I'm searching for you; it's because I'm searching for the best information for my specific case study. And that tells me you've been doing this for a long time and you have a large body of work out there. I'd love for you to go back in time to before you were creating any digital content online. How were you finding customers or how were they finding you? And tell me about that pre-internet. How was that working?
It's really interesting you should frame it that way. It's like, what were you doing before digital content, right? So, as I was graduating law school, I decided, this is back in the early 90s, I decided that I didn't want to work at a big law firm. I didn't want to get a job as a patent attorney. I wanted to create my own firm. So
But were you actually already studying to become a patent attorney through like was that your major?
yeah. So I was, well, I had studied electrical engineering as my undergrad, which is necessary in order to practice patent law is to have an engineering or science background. So then I went on to law school, and while I was in law school, I actually took the patent bar exam, which is necessary to practice before the United States Patent Office. So I did that while I was still in law school. I was actually qualified to represent people before the patent office as what's called a patent agent before I even had my New York State bar, which allowed me to call myself a lawyer. So essentially, I was ready to go when I graduated, but I didn't want to work at a big firm, and so I started my own. But the natural question is, well, where are the clients going to come from? So what I did is I launched a magazine. I launched a magazine for inventors, and I actually think I have one over here. This was like the first issue of it, Idea Marketplace. So this was in 1993, I think. Yeah, but the point is, what it was is a magazine that explained all of the things that an inventor wanted to learn about how to pursue an invention, how to have it manufactured, building a prototype, getting it protected, etc. And then, on the back of it, um, actually, it was not on the back cover per se of this particular issue, but in the magazine, I advertised the law firm. So essentially, what I was doing was content marketing in print form back in the 90s.
Where did this idea come from? Because, I know some people have done this, but you couldn't research online to hear what marketers are doing and how they're doing it. Like, was there somebody else doing this in another industry and you thought, hey, that's a good idea?
No, it just occurred to me, and I had a little bit of experience with publishing magazines. I did one in college. While I was in college, the um, the campus got a cable TV system, and but because there was no TV reception in that area previously, like you couldn't get uh, um, you know uh, get TV reception without this cable system. Basically, at the time, I don't know if you remember, you might be too young to remember, but we all got something called TV Guide, which would tell you what was on at a particular time. There was no on-screen guide like we have today, and there was no there was no internet to look it up, and so most people got a little booklet to their home called TV Guide, or in their local newspaper, the TV listings might be published. But being that the students on campus didn't have a TV Guide subscription and didn't um, have get the newspaper regularly, there was a need for information about what's on TV. So I published a cable guide, I got the information from a service that then kind of gave me the paste up ready content of the TV listings, and I got some local businesses to advertise. And we went around, we printed up 7,000 of them and went around campus and put it under each dorm room.
That's really cool. That's very cool. So you got advertisers to pay for the whole thing,
Uh
and
huh.
then you did the footwork of actually compiling and printing it,
Yes.
and then you distribute it for free.
And we distributed for free. Exactly.
Were you profitable with this
We were
with advertising?
profitable, but it's kind of laughable, like the amount of profit. There was like a whole lot of work to make maybe $250 per issue.
You get
Um,
experience though, don't you? That's what you
yes.
get.
No, absolutely.
And
And
then connected to advertisers, you could leverage that into the next and the next. Like that can keep rolling over once you have a good relationship with people who are willing to pay money to place ads.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like you said, the experience that it gave me, I mean, that led toward the way in which I launched my law firm, the marketing I did to launch my law firm. So that was one of the things, was the content marketing in print form. And the other thing was that I took an ad, and here's another thing that's going to just make me sound really old, but Yellow Pages. So, for those of you who don't remember Yellow Pages or are a little too young to remember that, we used to get a book um, direct to your house, which had all of the phone numbers. That's how you'd look up people's phone numbers, with the white pages, and then the yellow pages were advertisements. So if you wanted to find plumbers, you would turn to plumbing, and then that's where you would see the ads for all the local businesses, because there was no kind of Google Google Places, and there was no kind of Maps app on your phone to look up local businesses. We turned to the yellow pages, and I took the biggest ad under patent attorneys in the yellow pages throughout New York and California. And I had my offices in New York, and I also had an office in LA and in San Francisco. And I used to hop on a plane once a month and go out to San Francisco and Los Angeles, and visit with new clients, and then bring all of the new work back to New York, where my attorney team was, and we'd get the work done.
Yeah. Two questions that come to my mind as you're telling me the story. Number one is, what inspired you to go down the path of becoming a patent attorney? I know a lot of people think of like, hey, I should become a dentist because you could be you get licensed quicker than a surgeon and you get paid almost as much. People want to become lawyers because of their family prestige or something. Like, what was it for you?
Right. Well, first of all, it's funny that you mentioned dentist, because I did have a root canal this afternoon, and a little bit of residual numbness. So if you're noticing a slurring, it's not because I've been day drinking. It's just a little bit of Novocaine still in effect.
I was assuming it was the tequila.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a fair assumption, but it actually is just the Novocaine that is almost worn off, but not completely. But what inspired me to become a patent attorney is I was studying electrical engineering, and I realized that the reality of being an engineer was not getting to work on lots of different interesting projects, but getting assigned one little piece of some bigger project, and then working on that for 5 years. So it's like, oh, you're working for an aircraft company, or you're designing aircraft? No, you're designing the switch to the ventilation port over someone's seat, and then you work on that for 5 years. And That just did not fit for me. I like working on things that are interesting, stimulating, and so I also got involved in business, as you know, because I launched the magazine, and I had another business in college as well. And I thought about changing my major to business, to do something more interesting. But then I learned about the field of patent law, where essentially you need to be a lawyer and an engineer in order to do it. And I finished up electrical engineering, and I went on to law school. And it's funny, while I was in law school, a lot of people would be talking about what their career aspirations were. I was like, so like, I'm going into criminal law, or I'm going to be a corporate lawyer, or securities law, or anything like that. They had these notions. And when I told them about what I wanted to do, sometimes they'd say, "Oh, patent law, that sounds really cool. Maybe I'll look into that." And I'll ask them, "Well, what did you study undergrad?" And they'll say, well, I studied political science. Like, well, then it's too late. Unless you want to go back and get a degree in physics or a degree in
Yeah, do
mechanical
another two
engineering,
years or something, right?
yeah, like you'll be doing corporate law or something else like that.
Yeah, makes sense. My second question was this: you said that you launched this magazine, right? And by the way, I'm really impressed that you did that in college, and I think that's probably a part of what helped you realize, hey, I'm more entrepreneuristic, and I don't want to be stuck behind a desk doing this for 5 years. One little thing you want to do the big picture thing and have a bit more control of the direction. And I can definitely see myself seeing that as a dead end and not wanting. But believe it or not, like I have a team of people working for me, and a lot of them really prefer just coming to work, sitting at a desk and doing one thing forever and not having to come up with the kind of problems that we face as entrepreneurs. So, like, and bless them,
That sounds amazing. I mean, for the right job, I'm in.
yeah. Well, here's my other question. How did you get distribution for the print magazine? And how long did it take until you actually had qualified leads coming in?
Yeah, so that's another interesting story too. In terms of distribution. So first thing I did was I bought a list. So inventors, which are potential customers for a patent law firm, right? It's kind of like a nebulous type demographic. It's really difficult to find a list of
Yeah,
inventors.
there's no like doctors association for inventors or like, lawyers
Right,
association.
exactly. Yeah, and a lot of the people that consider themselves inventors, um, are really tire kickers, like guys that they'll be like, say like, I've been working on something. One of these days, I'm going to come out with it. So
No
the
money.
people that actually go ahead with patents don't identify as inventors. They're just like, oh, I had this great idea. Like, I want to do something with this. But they're not like a member of an inventors club or anything like that. But I did find one mailing list company that had a list of inventors. So one of the things we did was initially distribute magazines to them and sell subscriptions. Another thing that we did is we identified that there are a group of libraries around the United States called patent depository libraries. And they were essentially libraries that had a microfilm collection of the millions of patents that are in existence. And you can go there and you can search for you can search to see if your invention already exists, if someone else already patented it. And so this is what so I identified those libraries and I sent them a letter and I sent them a magazine and I said, we would like to supply you with copies. And if you'd like, we can give you some copies to keep available as a reference, like where people that visit the library can check it out. We could also send you copies to distribute for free to people that come in that are looking to do a patent search. And so some of the libraries said, yes, send us 2 copies just so we can have it on reference. Some of them said, send me 150 copies each time you publish. And so with the 70 different patent depository libraries, I think about 60 of them signed on and we distributed so many thousand copies in that way as well.
And were these
And
monthly?
then it was it started out as bi-monthly, and then toward the end, it's kind of slowed down to I think the last year that it was published, put out about maybe 2 or 3 issues because it just got busy with the law firm, and and I found other ways to generate leads, and so yeah, I mean, we put out a dozen or so issues of that magazine, but but yeah, essentially though, that was the pathway was the patent depository library was probably the most targeted way to get in front of people that are thinking about like I think I want to do a patent, and they invested enough of their own time to go to the library where they could research their invention. So that they were reasonably good prospects.
That's super cool. What impresses me so much is that uh, I have so many people who are just like, no, I don't have time to write a blog post or put up a social media post or even snap a photo and put a caption under it, just to stay relevant. And even for me, sometimes it feels like a lot of work. Whereas back then, you had to go and actually write all this stuff, and you probably had to format it like analog, right? Not on a computer, like cutting stuff out and arranging. Or did you have a computer back then to do it?
We used
Corel Draw or something?
something called PageMaker,
Okay.
lay out the pages, and I used Photoshop. It was like Photoshop 2.0 or something like that.
Okay.
It was a
So at
really
least you
early
had a
Photoshop.
computer.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did get to use a computer. I had a Mac from law school, and I back then I think one of the fastest Macs they made, which is like if you looked at the specs today, it would be a joke. I mean, it's like I had to buy extra memory for it to be able to handle these photographs. So I had 32 megs of memory, not 32 gigs, 32 megs, 1,000th of that, right? So which was back then they charged the going rate was $500. No, it wasn't five. It was $50 per meg. So that was like a $1,600 investment in just memory chips to have 32 megs of
And
memory.
$1,600 back then was a lot more than it is now. So
Yeah,
that was big.
that's true.
I remember when I first bought like my first gigabyte hard drive, and I think I spent like $6,000 on it because this is early days of video editing, and I needed a hard drive that could handle it. And I was just like, I'll never fill this up in my lifetime. Is what I thought. It was a gigabyte.
I remember buying a computer with a 20 meg hard drive. Like IBM.
You remember the ones without hard drives, right? Where you had to stick a floppy disk inside just to run
I did.
anything.
Well, my first computer was a Radio Shack TRS-80 Model 1, which now kind of that's even less. It had 16K of memory, which is a thousandth of the 16 meg, which is a thousandth of the 16 gig. So literally 1 millionth of the memory in a computer today.
Okay. I'm going to say one more thing. I'm going to one up you, and then we're going to move on to the next thing. But a friend of mine had bought an old computer. He found it at this used electronics shop. And in order to boot up this computer, it had a magnetic tape reel that took 90 minutes to play all the way through and load all the data into the flash RAM. I don't even know how much there was, but so booting this device took 90 minutes because you had to play the tape all the way through. And then you hook it up to a TV with the RCA cables, and then you could play this one, like really, really simple game. It's like, turn-based, story game. And oh gosh, I remember like booting for 90 minutes. I was like, are you kidding? But it was real. It was a real computer and a real loading system. And I don't think it ever got popular because no one wants to wait 90 minutes to boot a computer.
Yeah,
That
thankfully the computer that I had a ROM chip that had the operating
There you
system
go.
built in.
All right. Let's go into what's happening right now because we've come a long way from there. But what I appreciate is that what you're sharing with the audience here is that content marketing is not a fad. It's not something that some marketer cooked up and it works today and tomorrow it's going to be gone. It is a really legitimate thing that's worked from ever since printed matter was a thing, right? Where you actually educate people, lead with value, and then people are more open to finding out and trusting you with their time and money. And right now, I know you've got your podcast. I know you got your YouTube channel. I know you got blog posts. I know this because every time I search about patents, your name keeps coming up. You also have a very specific claim to fame. Could you tell us about that? I want to hear it from you about
Oh, wait,
how.
wait. I'm not sure which specific claim to fame.
All right, you go with whichever one comes to your mind, and then if it's not it, then I'll tell you the one I was thinking of.
That I wrote the book for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. Is that the one?
That's it. And is that something you just thought up, or is that something that the government actually reached out to you about?
Well, the American Bar Association, which it's the largest bar association in the world, um, something like 600,000 members, and they reached out to me asking me to write this book that explains to entrepreneurs how patents work.
That's amazing. That's the claim to fame I was talking about, because like
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I,
absolutely. That's it. Like
I
imagine
was
if,
thinking it could be another one, but
like the highest authority in the world on a certain topic reaches out and says, "Could you please write a book to help better explain the process to people?" So, guys, I'll say one thing. When Rich approached me and says, "Hey, maybe I could help you with this," I was extremely happy to know that here is the guy who, I don't think there's anybody that I know of that can one up and say, I know a bit more about this and I can do a better job than him. Um, so if you have an idea, or something that needs license, trademark protection, patenting, reach out to him. There'll be some links below in the podcast. I'm just pausing this, doing a little plug for you here. There'll be links below so you can reach out to him and find out if he's the right fit for you. By the way, I live in Japan. He's in New York. There's no like problems with it as far as like geographic locations go, in case you're wondering. So back to the story. You've got this great let's say backing from an authority.
yeah,
Your
opportunity for credibility.
credibility there, that's the word we're looking for. Now you're creating a whole bunch of content. My listeners are always curious. They're just like, how do we actually make money with content? So could you explain how you do it, like from the time an idea hits your head to like, hey, I should write something about this, or record a video about this, or do a podcast episode about this, to when someone actually reaches out and says, "Hey, can we do business together?" Kind of, I know that in your case is probably going to be like the entry point, and then like a whirlpool of a lot of different things, and then an exit. So, but do your best to tie the events on the typical customer that comes to you.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's not cause and effect typically. It's more of an emergent. So the notion of an emergent is it's kind of like if you want to grow a tree, you of course provide a seed. You have the right soil conditions, you have the right sunshine conditions, the proper temperature, and from all of those factors together, what emerges is this new tree. Emerges is life from a seed, and it's a similar thing with content. Is it's not strictly cause and effect. It's not that this podcast leads to the client and then leads to a phone call and that phone call leads to the client. It's multi-channel approach. So when I end up working with a client and I sit down with them for the first time and I ask them, well, how did you hear of us? Usually they'll say something like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, I saw you speak at CellerCon like 5 years ago, and then I listened to you on a podcast, and I saw some of your Instagram stories, and wow, like you're everywhere. So that's what I hear over and over again, like you're everywhere, and just like Ken, you're saying in terms of your your research on patents just reveals my content. That's the thing that works. So I feel that a lot of times people try to look for the most direct cause and effect link between creating a piece of content and like what's going to create um, the most leads. And what I found is it's just a matter of create all kinds of interesting stuff, and that's how people find you.
Mm. Now, when you pick your topics, like how much of that is focused on like SEO optimization versus how much of it is focused on what the customers are, what's actually practical and useful to them that they may not even know about? Like, I know there's a balance here when it comes to content creation. How do you ch- face that?
Well, I would say all of the website stuff is based on SEO. Like the art, like website articles, some of them were initially put there for the sake of customer flow through the a web traffic flow through the website. But in terms of increasing the SEO reach of the site, like that, the articles are all chosen according to keywords, and like they are by and large written by writers rather than by me or my team, my direct team, like my attorneys. when it comes to video content, it is just all a matter of like what people have been talking about, what people have been asking about, kind of like what's the question on other people's minds, and kind of like what then inspires me to speak about. When it comes to like Instagram content and such, it's a matter of kind of just where I am and what I'm up to. Um, so it kind of depends on the channel, and the channel I think leads to the type of content that I create for it. So yeah, I would say the most strategic is the website and the web properties, and that's just very scientific in terms of SEO, what's going to work best. The other content, it's just it comes from that multi-channel approach, and then like the podcast itself, that comes from the people that I encounter, the people that have interesting stories. They have something to offer to others that are pursuing their own creativity and taking their own ideas and notions and turning them into reality. And so I have I think I'm about 140 episodes into the podcast, and by and large, that's what dictates it. It's not really a matter of kind of being strategic about what, let's say, my ideal customer wants in a podcast. It really is just about what's interesting, what I find interesting, what I think other people will find
So
interesting.
that's more like your creative outlet more than anything, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, but I think that's another thing too, is people, this ties directly into your question of people are wondering, well, how do I make money from content, or how do I get business from content? Friend of mine told me that the best reason for doing a podcast is not for finding ideal customers in the audience. It's through the connections you make by reaching out to other people, asking for them to recommend guests for your podcast, and the people that you have on your podcast. And like those are the best connections that you make. And you develop rapport with people through having a conversation with them. You create relationship. I've gotten lots of referrals from clients, that not from clients, but from podcast guests that then like thought of me when something came up that was relevant to what I do. And I've made friends that way. So in essence, though, having a podcast um, can be a great way to just build your network, and a network of potential strategic partners, and referrers of customers and clients, and so that's what it really is for.
Got it. Got it. And if you were to look at, like, as far as new business that's coming into your company, like in a quarterly basis, do you try to segment where they originated, or is it all so much of like let's just say a fruit salad of a variety of ways that everybody comes in from, that it's hard to segment? Like, are you running ads? You've got speaking engagements, you've got social media, you got your website. How does that kind of split up if you were to roughly
It's
estimate?
really hard to track,
Right.
but I've done some spot checking, and I could tell you this past October, 70% of my revenue came from people that I've met at events. And so in some way, from people that I met from events. And that includes, and that's where content comes together with the other channels, is like, so a lot of times when I'm speaking at an event, it's because of someone that I've met at another event, or someone that knows of me, or has gotten to know me better through the podcast. Um, and and so even though I could trace most people to having met me at an event, or something that one of my events led to, in terms of a speaking opportunity, a channel, someone else's podcast that I was on that then led to this client. So so ultimately, though, it's through content of various forms, and I'll put events as being part of content, because a lot of times at events, I'm speaking, or I'm meeting people that then lead toward other content that leads to client relationships.
One thing I found, and I think this is true for almost anyone who's invested $10,000 or more to work with someone, is regardless of where you meet someone, let's say, you shake hands at a cocktail party or see them speaking on a stage. There's this thing that I call the double take, which is like this guy seems to be amazing. Everything he's saying is exactly what I'm looking for. Let me Google him. And then that's the double take. So the first impression, amazing. But before they want to commit any money, any significant investment of their time or money, they're going to Google you. And then the more social proof you have in the forms of your website, your social media, and any other valuable content you have, the more likely that that second stage of like actually transacting will happen. And that's where, like, I would venture to say that out of the 70% of the people who met you at a conference, 99% of them also consume some of your information on social media or your website before doing business with you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the multi-channel approach that I was referring to. It's being everywhere is what's made the biggest difference. So it's not strictly cause and effect, like this specific piece of content led to so many clients. It's the fact that they looked around and they saw all of this different content that created that 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 created additional credibility for what they already thought. So they already thought like that maybe I was someone that could help them, or my team is equipped to help them. But then when they started to research and they found that that there are other items of content that just kind of show that, yeah, we are the ones that could help them. That's what makes the difference.
How many hours a month do you estimate you're spending on content creation?
I would say 4 to 8.
4 to 8. So that's like 1 or 2 hours a week, roughly. Is that right?
Yeah,
If you're to break it
I'd
down.
say so.
Okay. And what I love about that is when you put into perspective that 1 or 2 hours a week is is something that stays there forever. Like people will find that same article useful today or 10 years from now, right? People will find that same YouTube video show up on their feed today or 10 years from now. So you're building these bricks in this foundation, and it's not like you go out and eat a meal and you got to eat again the next day. It's like, no, it's a permanent thing, and it keeps building as long as you're putting it in the right places. I want to steer this a little bit. We only have a little bit of time left, but do you see what you're doing right now as something you'll continue for at least another 10 years? Or are you seeing a transition around the corner where you're trying out new methods of content creation or like online lead generation?
Yeah, absolutely. I am definitely in transition where I've over the last couple of years I've been looking um, to create systems in my law firm that allow for me to step away. And so I am less involved in the work than I was even last year. Um, and also kind of increasing some of the ways in which I'm having strategic conversations about exit. So not just my own exit, I mean for clients and in terms of creating exit valuation. So it's a very high value conversation when you can work with someone and show them that currently their company is probably worth about 3 million to buyers, but with a couple of years of strategic work that includes IP and other things. It's not just about IP. The company could be worth 25 million. So that is a high value conversation, showing someone how they can get um, $22 million dollars more for their company by focusing on creating those systems and making the company transferable over the next several years. And so I'm getting more and more involved with that. I'm working with um, exit planners and financial advisors and people that have clients that have more mature businesses that are looking to maximize their IP. So that's one of the things I'm doing while at the same time being less of the, say, the man on the street when it comes to the patent work that's done by my firm. And over the next several years, I'm looking to slowly take myself out of a lot of it, if not all of it. So yeah, I would say in 5 years, I probably will be only slightly involved in the law firm.
So we're talking about retirement pretty much. This is what's like going on, right?
I think it's working on specific projects of the type that I was just alluding to in terms of working
So
with a
is
few
that like a
companies to help them
consulting type of capacity?
consulting. Yep.
Got it. Got it. I'm just going through this book right now. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Are you familiar with that? Ben
No.
Horowitz. So he's actually one of the guys. He actually IPO'd like in early 2000, like when everything was crashing, and he had as far as web technologies go, and he had some very he had a service called LoudCrowd, which eventually sold for several $billion. But what you're describing to me is a lot of what's in that book, and I won't get too much into it. I'll drop a link down below. But when it comes to transitioning a company to be sellable, uh, there is so much that goes into it, and the value of that is astronomical. If you can take, potential in his case, it was like a $20 million company, and he sold for multiple billions because he structured it correctly, and he brought on like he was a young IT kind of guy, but he brought on some experienced executives to help him through that. And then that's what raised the valuation. Well, it definitely helped. So I see how what you're doing could be worth billions just by, you know, some small tweaks that move really big numbers.
Yeah, it's actually that this is just a few really simple principles to it.
But you have to know, right? You have to know what they are.
Well, I mean, I could tell you very simply, it's just systematizing things. The extent to which any part of the business resides in the brain of the owner is the extent to which it's not transferable, right? So taking the things which rely on the owner and and making them into an SOP or creating a system around them, creating IP around them. That's all about making it transferable, so someone else could step into the business, and there wouldn't immediately be a lot of things lost because the owner is no longer there. So, I mean, and the other key principle is that good exit strategy is just good business strategy. It's the same thing. Like the things which make your company scalable, the things which make your company scalable, then make it transferable, right? Because your company's not scalable when it's relying on a couple of individuals, let's say. When there are actually processes that allow you to do it on a higher level and do it at scale. So it's all part of the same thing. It's just a matter of creating the right systems, and that's what makes it transferable, and transferable makes it more valuable. So in a nutshell, that's all of exit valuation acceleration.
Amazing. And I bet that's what you're doing in your own business right now so that you can, well, you've probably already done most of the footwork. I want to close this
Oh, there's a lot
off.
more to do.
There's a lot more to do. Okay.
There's always more to do, you know.
Always more.
No, Ken.
Get more. Yeah. You're going to have to get a replacement, like a mini me at some point to take the helm. I'd love to hear your advice for anybody right now who's in a professional services businesses as such as you are, somebody who's highly qualified at what they do, but they're not in the game as far as content creation goes. What I mean by that is they're not producing regularly. They might do it here or there, or they might guest on other people's things. What do you recommend to someone who's actually thinking about content creation as a lead generation strategy or a lead nurture strategy, but they're not doing it? What are some steps they could think about?
Just take out your phone and start recording, or open up a Zoom window and hit record. But just start recording um, yourself talking about the things that people want to know, and you know what it is that your customers want to know about, right? It's the things that when you're talking with them, what questions are they asking you? What are you going out of your way to explain to them? And then of course, like you were saying, in terms of you create the content once and then it's something that you're able to impact people forever with. It's the same thing. It's like if what are the things that you couldn't possibly sit down and explain to every customer because you'd just be talking all the time because it takes a half an hour to explain to a customer, like, well, then make a video and explain exactly what it is that you wish you had the time to explain to every one of your customers. But just, take out your phone and start recording, and you might not use um, any of what you recorded initially, um, but if you do start sharing it, you'll find that people are interested. You'll find an audience. The audience will find itself, is another way that people sometimes put it. If you just start talking about the things that are core to your expertise.
That makes sense. Guys, I think you've heard this message from multiple people. Here, Richard is reinforcing that just get started. You don't need fancy gear or anything. Now, uh, to the audience who's listening, whether
But
it's
if you're
for the
traveling and you're on the road all the time, you need a Go Box studio. You do.
absolutely do. And we'll put a link to that below. Richard, if somebody wants to get in touch with you to potentially hire you, work with you, or maybe just find out more about what you do, what's the best place where people can get an overview and come into your world?
Okay. Well, I mean, first of all, if you want to learn more about patents, you can go to my website, goldsteinpatentlaw.com. And there are great videos there that explain the patent process and how it works. If you want to read about the patent process, the book that I wrote, the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent, really awesome resource, probably about a 4 hour read. And if you read it, you'll know more than really 99% of other similar entrepreneurs out there about how patents work. If you want to find out if it's a match to work together with us and talk to my team, you want to talk to Larry Slavin on my team, and we've got a convenient link set up for that. It's speaktolarry.com, and you can set up an appointment right there. And then the last thing I'll mention is if you want to check out my podcast, it's called Innovations and Breakthroughs, and it's available on all of the platforms where you can find podcasts.
Okay. Guys, all the links that he just mentioned, they're going to be down below in the podcast show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the description. Otherwise, thank you so much, Rich, for being on the show. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time.